Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about a brand new mechanic that I really do believe will be introduced in Generation 10. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video, and let's get into it. So I believe that this new mechanic in Generation 10 is finally going to be Pokemon fusions. I mean, we're in Generation 9 now. It's kind of unbelievable that we don't have this type of mechanic yet, but I really feel like Generation 10 is going to be the one. It just kind of makes so much sense. But before we get into the actual fusion mechanics, I quickly want to go over some of the previous hints that we've had for some of the mechanics that we've had over the last few generations. So there have been loads of hints in the anime, the mangas, and kind of like all around the Pokemon franchise about the previous mechanics. Now, these are more like hints and not like direct links. So with the Z moves, they were hinted at with the first anime series. So there was this old guy in one of the episodes and he had a Snorlax, and around his kind of like neck he had like this necklace pendant thing and had the exact same shape of a Z crystal. Now we know that Snorlax has its own Z move. So next we had the Dynamax slash Gigantamax kind of phenomenon, and again this is actually been hinted at in the first anime series. So there was a gigantic tentacle that was kind of destroying a city, but there was also a gigantic Dragonite that was kind of like in this like ocean, like I think near a lighthouse as far as I remember. And this, like, we don't see gigantic Pokemon all the time. So when we see something like this, I think, okay, that must have been a hint towards Gigantamax and Dynamax. And then we've got Terras. So Terra Pokemon have this like kind of crystalline structure around them. And again, this was again hinted at in the first anime series with a crystal onyx. So you can see from this picture that it is a kind of like an onyx with its like, normal shape, but instead of it being kind of like made out of rocks, it was made out of crystals. Now again, this isn't like a direct link to the actual phenomenon of Terras itself. It didn't change type, it was still a rock Pokemon as far as we know, but it did have this crystalline structure which was very heavily hinted at with this Terra phenomenon. So after all those three, we kind of have a few hints to the anime series between these previous mechanics. However, there are a lot of hints for fusions. So I'm going to go through this list, and this may blow your mind of how many links there are to Pokemon fusions. So I think when we come to Pokemon fusions, there are a few like kind of like spotlights that we kind of already know about when it comes to Pokemon fusions. In Generation 5, we had the Zekrom and Reshiram fused with Kyurem. And we also know that there was a original dragon which had all three of them fused. Now we didn't see that, but I believe when it comes to the Generation 5 remakes, we will see that, whether that's going to be like a Legends game or like more of like a remake style game like ORAS or BDSP. Who knows? But I believe we're going to see that original dragon in some shape or form when it comes to the remakes. So when it comes to Generation 10, this is actually the perfect time for Generation 5 remakes. It kind of goes like in every 2 generations that we have a remake. So Generation 8, in that series of games, we had the Brilliant Diamond, Sun and Pearl games. So obviously remakes of Diamond and Pearl. And if we go back another 2 generations, Generation 6, we had the ORAS remakes, or the Ruby and Sapphire remakes. And going back another 2 generations, we go to Generation 4, and that was the Gold and Silver remakes. So it kind of goes in every 2 generations. It just makes sense with like new hardware and such. So I think when it comes to the Generation 5 games, again, I think this will come or be announced or released for the Generation 10 series of games. So obviously when it comes to the Gen 10 games, the fusion mechanic will then be introduced in those games. It won't be introduced in the Black and White remakes or the Legends style game. It will be introduced in those first Generation 10 games. And if they're introduced in those Gen 10 games, it lends itself perfectly for a Generation 5 kind of remake. We've got some other stuff as well. So we have the anime. So again, in the original series, there is actually a fusion Pokemon between Blastoise and Venusaur, and you actually see the fusion happen. Now, I don't know whether this is, again, like seeing like Z moves and Dynamax and the Terra Pokemon, they were hinted at and they weren't actually shown off like properly what they actually were. But in terms of the fusion mechanic, I don't know if that's going to be like an actual mechanic that we see in the games, whether it would be like a double battle and you get to have the option to fuse those 2 Pokemon together. That would be quite a cool, interesting mechanic. But funny enough, when I talk about that, because when we come to Generation 9, we actually have that mechanic already. So Tatsugiri and Dondozo have this special ability that allows Dondozo to kind of eat up Tatsugiri and gain loads of stats. And I believe that would be a brilliant way to kind of use a fusion mechanic. You have two Pokemon on the field, and you have a kind of like a stat boost or like a form change, and it will be one Pokemon on the field on your side with maybe just stronger stats. And we've already got this. So the mechanic kind of already is there. It just needs to be evolved on. And I don't know whether that was a hint for, for us from Game Freak, but that's kind of insane that we already have that type of mechanic at our hand. Okay, so we've had Generation 5, we've had this kind of like Tatsugiri Dondozo, Generation 10 hint as well, and now we've had the anime, and now we're gonna go actually into Generation 9, and Generation 9 has other kind of hints towards a fusion mechanic. So obviously over the last few months we've heard about this Cobalion, Virizion, Terrakion fusion, and this Entei, Raikou and Suicune fusion as well, and we believed that this was going to happen in these games at some point, maybe in the DLC, but then we had our Pokemon Presents, and then it was just kind of shown off as separate Pokemon, which I thought was kind of strange. So we had Walking Wake and also Iron Leaves, and I really was kind of surprised that they just kind of like just pushed out there, and there was no story element to it. It was just kind of this like promotional thing, which I thought was strange. However, I do think in the DLC, or maybe just before the DLC, there will be other promotions that will allow for Paradox versions of, I think probably Cobalion and Terrakion and Entei and Raikou. So that's really interesting. I think when we go back to Heath's book and we see a fusion of them, I think this is definitely a hint for some type of fusion between those two lines of Pokemon. I don't know whether that will happen in this game, but if that's a hint towards something we will see maybe in the DLC, but maybe Generation 10, that could be a big hint towards a fusion mechanic. And again, that is just kind of insane. There's so many like mechanics and fusion hints that we've already seen previously. So the main question is really, why is Generation 10 the kind of time for a fusion mechanic? Now, Generation 10 is kind of like an interesting number. I believe instead of it being called Generation 10, it's going to be called Generation X, and obviously X is kind of like a fusion kind of like symbol, because it's like a overcrossing of two lines. Like we had the Mega symbol, and that was kind of like a weaving of DNA, which kind of makes sense because it's like a stronger version of the main Pokemon themselves. So I really think that Generation X is going to be kind of like the best advertising for this fusion mechanic. So I really think Generation 10 is going to be announced and released in 2026, which also lands with the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. And just with all these hints and links, it just makes sense that fusions are something that the Pokemon company really like. And we also know that Pokemon Infinite Fusion has done really well on YouTube, so it's something that the fan base also really likes as well. And yeah, with all the links to Generation 5 and also the anime and Generation 9, it makes sense. So I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to leave a comment on what you think about the Pokemon Fusion mechanic and whether you think it's going to be kind of announced for Generation 10. So yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. There are plenty of other videos on my channel related to Pokemon and video game music. So if you guys like that type of stuff, make sure to subscribe because there will be loads more to come in the future. But yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.